Welcome into the Fright Club podcast. And in this case, we're heading into the Fright Club library. That'll be cool. She is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And we're from madwolf.com. And last time out, we were live at Gateway Film Center.
Lovely.
As we revisited the last 10 years of Spanish language horror, because it has been a good 10 years.
Yeah, there's been this crazy explosion of just masterpieces coming from Mexico and from Spain and from Latin America. And we showed one of those. We showed the stop motion animated The Wolf House, which is glorious. Yeah. And people really dug it.
They did.
And then there were so many great movies that we did a 6 instead of top 5, and we still had like an honorable mention list that was like 10 movies long.
Yeah, so, once we started getting into that, we're like, holy moly, it has been a great 10 years. Yeah. And people were really psyched to see The Wolf House because it's not one that you get a chance to see on the big screen very often.
No, so it came out really at the height of right at the end of 2020. So the height of lockdown, nobody didn't get a theatrical release. And even then, if you remember, was really before streamers knew what they were doing. So it didn't get a proper streaming release either. So most people just missed it, and it's amazing.
Yeah. So we had a good crowd, had good interaction on the podcast, and some good comments. So thank you for that. But now we're back. We take a little bit of a left turn and go into the library and find a book that it was interesting when we first heard about this book. If there was one where you could say, I'm going to write a book for Hope Madden, it's this book right here, because her love for Silence of the Lambs. I mean, I like it too, but talk about fangirl.
Yeah.
So we are so excited to welcome in the author of Hannibal Lecter, A Life. Let's see that. Yeah, get that nice pie there, meat pie. Brian Raftery, welcome to the Fright Club podcast, sir.
Hey, gang. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. This is great.
It is.
Oh, thanks. I'm excited to talk.
When he got the email of this opportunity, I was just like,
I laughed to myself.
I know. I was like, can I get the book? Can I get it right now? And I tore through it. I mean, I can't even tell you how much.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Oh, thanks. That's awesome.
I think, let's start off why don't you give us sort of a synopsis of what the book is about? I'll see if I can calm down for a second.
Yeah, it's called Hannibal Lecter, A Life, and it's strange because it is a biography of a fictitious character, which is kind of a weird thing. I have a great editor, Simon & Schuster, and we had talked about a Silence of the Lambs book, and then he decided, he had the great idea of just focusing on Hannibal Lecter. So the book basically starts with Tom Harris, who was the author of all these books, and it kind of starts off his career when he's younger as a newspaper guy, and it goes all through the creation of Hannibal Lecter and how he the books that, Red Dragon, The Silence of the Lambs, to Hannibal. We get into the making of all those books. I talk a lot about the making of the films, and then we look at the TV show. So there's a lot of, individual chapters about these kind of very seminal Hannibal Lecter kind of releases. But I think hopefully what the big picture is kind of looking at what it means that for the last almost 50 years now, I mean, it's getting pretty close to 50 years since his first appearance, what it means for us as a country that we have been obsessed with this, incredibly polite man-eater who, when you count up his screen time and page time, is actually not a very prominent culture character in some ways. So it was kind of like looking at, why do we love Hannibal Lecter? How is he made? How are these great movies and books made? And also kind of what does it say about us that we are still invoking him, talking. I mean, I took my daughter to go see the new Anaconda movie last weekend, and there's a Silence of the Lambs reference in there, and they don't even mention the movie. They just make a joke about the lotion in the basket. I'm like, this movie is 35 years old. Like, it's still in the culture. There was a Hannibal Lecter joke in The Naked Gun last year. It's just, I think there may be a U.S. president who maybe has talked about Hannibal Lecter from time to time. I'm not sure. So it's this weird thing where this character has never gone away, even though the whole point of this character is that, he's always kind of looming over you. So it's kind of remarkable to me that how he's become this big. And I was kind of fascinated, why of all these bad guys has this guy become the sort of face of American evil or American anti-heroism, however you want to make it.
Yeah, because it's interesting, even if you go back after the fact, if you didn't see Manhunter, and then you went back and saw Brian Cox playing him, even then, there was something about that character, even though it was a very minor part in that movie.
Yeah.
More when they remade it for Red Dragon. But even then, there was something there about that character that was like, I want to know more about that guy.
Yeah, it's like 2 scenes. I mean, he's in maybe 10 minutes of the movie, Brian Cox, and it's remarkable. And the same with when you look at Anthony Hopkins' screen time in Silence of the Lambs. He's not in it a whole lot, but when he's in it, he's sometimes looking right at you. So it's kind of like, it's for me to have a character. I really can't think of like a pop cultural character with so little, who really is not very prolific, yet who looms as large. I mean, Darth Vader, at a certain point, they just started putting Darth Vader in everything. I mean, there's very few kind of side villains who kind of loom as large as Lecter has.
So, from what we understand, Tom Harris, pretty reclusive. So how did you approach? Did you know from the beginning he was not going to cooperate with this at all? And how did you strategize around that?
I knew. I mean, Tom Harris is remarkable. We talk about literary recluses, and he is genuinely. I mean, he's in his 80s now, and his first novel came out in 1975, Black Sunday. I think in that entire time, from what I can tell, he has given only 3 extensive interviews, on the record interviews, which is remarkable. And yet at the same time, he's not a hermit. Like, he kind of lives a Hannibal Lecter lifestyle. He has sold 50 million books or so. He has lived in Europe. He has traveled the world. He's been everywhere. He's kind of a bon vivant. So he's not hiding, but he does not want to talk about his work. So my editor and I knew that he was probably not going to talk to us. I managed to, I emailed his agent and we let them know. We let them kind of decline. So it became a real process of finding people who'd worked with him, which frankly, 1 or 2 people who worked with him actually passed away right before or right while I was doing this. So it was a very small group of people to talk to. And then looking at his interviews and peeling away as much as I could from his life. And the real joy of this project for me was, and Hope, if you're a Silence of the Lambs fan, you can probably, and I am too, I've been obsessed with this movie for a long time. Jonathan Demme, the director of the movie, he passed away a couple years ago. His papers are at the University of Michigan. And so before the book was kind of finalized, I called up the library there, the archivist there, and I said, look, I wanted this book. A lot of it's about Silence of the Lambs. Is there anything in his archives about this movie? And Phil, who was this great guy at the University of Michigan, was like, yeah, it's about 13 boxes, and no one's really looked at them in a while. And I was like, I'll be on a plane tomorrow. So I got to spend a whole week. And it was really one of the most fun weeks of my. I mean, it was frantic, but because I only had 5 days to go through all these boxes. But I was just plowing through these books, and it's everything from contracts, like Jodie Foster's contract, memos, behind-the-scenes photos of Jodie Foster with FBI agents, crazy kind of transcripts of radio interviews Anthony Hopkins did. And so one of the things I found was a couple of faxes between Tom Harris and Jonathan Demme, or the producers. And I was able to divine some stuff from that. But it really felt like anything I could find on Harris. I mean, again, he's written a handful of novels, 1 or 2 forewords or author's notes about these books in particular. Never has really talked about Lecter extensively in any kind of interview. I mean, only a little bit here and there. So I knew that was going to be a challenge, but it also was kind of the fun because I'm writing about this kind of elusive world-traveling genius. And I'm also writing about this elusive world-traveling genius. So I don't want to get litigious. I don't want to open up the lawsuits and compare Tom Harris to Hannibal Lecter, but there are some interesting similarities,
So were you the first person to crack open that stash of papers and things?
I think it hadn't been fully indexed yet. I think some researchers had, but so far as I know, because some of it was not itemized yet. I mean, I felt like, whether I was or not, I felt like I was opening like the Ark of the Covenant, where it was just sort of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe. And I mean, at one point, like on the 4th or 5th day, one of my favorite discoveries was I was going through a folder in one of these boxes. It was like the 13th box. And I'd spent all week just taking photos and scanning everything I could, and not even really reading it, just because I was going to take it home with me. And in this one folder, this little envelope pops out, just a tiny little envelope, and it just says Best Director. And I open it up, and indeed, it's Jonathan Demme's, like, when they read the Oscar, it's the actual card. And from that envelope falls this tiny, even smaller piece of paper on stationery, and it clearly has not been read in 35 years. And it says, Dear Jonathan, congratulations, for once the Best Picture of the Year actually won. And it's from Steven Spielberg. And I had 2 thoughts. One is that, oh my gosh, I can't believe I found this. It's just buried in the bottom of the box. My second thought was, I could fit this in my pocket and no one would know. And I'm a very honest person, and I wouldn't do it. But for like a second, I was like, I would love to have this framed in my it's on Steven Spielberg's letterhead. So stuff like that was just such a trip to find. And I know there's more stuff in those boxes. Like if I had 3 weeks, I probably could have found more. But yes, I've been telling friends of mine who are movie fans, like imagine a movie you've been obsessed with for decades, and someone just opens a room and puts out a bunch of boxes, and it's like, here's every question you had answered somewhere in this pile. And that was really fun.
So I'm just picturing you walking in that room and suddenly a chorus goes, "Whoa!"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, if I could do this for every movie I'm obsessed with, I would probably never be home again. That's the research of all these, doing the interviews, going through old stories, going through stuff is just the most fun part of it. Really.
Amazing.
It's funny that that you bring up the research, because I think that is what struck me as I read it, was how thoroughly researched this is, like the scraps and little bits and pieces and stuff that I'd never heard of. There's a lot in here about Jodie Foster, when her roommate told her about John Hinckley, just said the word John Hinckley, which you compared to the scene where she finds out about where her roommate at the FBI training says something to her. And I thought, I'd never heard that story before, that I never heard Jodie Foster ever talk about or allow anybody to talk about John Hinckley. So I was so stunned by everything that you managed to dig up on what seems like almost a throwaway topic. Is this fictional character, and I'm going to write a biography about him. But
right, yeah. Oh, thanks. I mean, it's fat. The thing is, to be perfectly honest, so your listeners and watchers know, I did not get a chance to talk to Jodie Foster. I didn't talk to Hopkins. I talked to Brian Cox. I talked to Michael Mann. I talked to Ted Talley, who wrote the screenplay. I had tons of correspondence and memos from the FBI. But yeah, Foster's life and career is really fascinating. And I think, to your point, because she's been so famous for so long, I mean, she's probably one of the first actors I knew. I mean, I saw Freaky Friday when I was like 4 years old, so I've known who Jodie Foster was my entire life. I mean, I'm only in my 20s, as you can tell by my hairline. But yeah, I mean, I had really forgotten the Hinckley stuff, and I understand why she didn't want to talk about it for decades. But it was so insanely documented. I mean, she wrote a whole essay for Esquire about it, which is really remarkable. And just, I find her, I've always admired her as an actor, but when you read about what she went through at that point in her life, at an incredibly young age, in a very public way, it's like, the press was not kind to her. Like, it's really, and you can see, she talks about how she was, for a long time, and still is, kind of drawn to characters who were misunderstood, or maybe kind of just, kind of not tossed to the side, but kind of just not really seen by society, and trying to give those characters a voice. And Clarice is obviously that kind of character, kind of writ large,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's and it's funny that your book really dives into how, after The Silence of the Lambs, the way that the narrative changed, particularly in terms of Clarice Starling, how I think the world realized, pop culture talks about Hannibal Lecter all the time, but there is a massive number of people who really loved Clarice, looked up to Clarice, maybe then decided, as you point out, they went almost like the Scully effect. Like, women thought, I can do that, and then all of a sudden they went and did that.
Yeah.
And felt very betrayed when then Tom Harris took her in a direction that they, hated.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because for me, I wanted to get as much stuff as I could about Jodie Foster and the Clarice character as I could, because I don't think there is a Hannibal Lecter without Clarice. I mean, obviously, in Red Dragon, Will Graham is kind of the antagonist. In the TV show that Brian Fuller did, it's Will Graham and other characters. But I think the reason why Silence of the Lambs in particular, and was so beloved, and why Hannibal was so hard for a lot of readers, is because I do think that Hannibal only exists. I mean, we are the ones who see Hannibal through Clarice in the movie and in the books. And she's a much bigger part of the Silence of the Lambs novel and movie than Hannibal Lecter is. I mean, in terms of story and page time or screen time. And I think it's because she's the only character in those books, for the most part, that he forges any kind of real connection with. And sometimes it's manipulative, but I do think, despite the very strange ending of Hannibal the novel, which they changed in the movie, I do think he ultimately respects her, and I think he does kind of love her platonically, and maybe in some other way, but I think it's like there's a real connection between the two of them. And yeah, I think Clarice is like, and I think particularly Foster's turn as Clarice is one of the most important and like crucial and influential pop culture performances of the last 40, 50 years. I mean, you look at CSI, or you mentioned the X-Files. I mean, just on screen, I think that molded a lot of characters, but also there were actual, I interviewed a woman who saw Silence of the Lambs at 19 and went on to work for the FBI for 20 years, and it was very much influenced by Clarice Starling. And I think, it's not lost on me that true crime, which is bigger than ever now, when you look at the statistics, both creators and consumers, it's a female-driven medium in many ways. And I wonder how much Clarice Starling has to do with that. I mean, I think the idea of being this very smart, slightly in over your head, determined young woman who will do whatever to help other women or understand what happened to the women, I think that's a very powerful idea. And also, Foster's just so good. Those scenes when they go back and forth.
Right.
I mean, it's the crazy thing is, as much as I love this movie, I never saw it in the theater until a couple of years ago because I was only like 15 when it came out. I've been blaming my mom, saying, "Why didn't you let me see that in the theater?" And she's been kind of like, "You were too afraid to see it." I'm like, "It's probably true. I was probably too afraid." But I watched it on video and Laserdisc and DVD and on cable for years, and I only got to see it in the theater 2 or 3 years ago out here. And those scenes where Foster and Hopkins are looking at one another, when you see that on the big screen, they are looking at you. It's nuts. I mean, it's like watching a totally different movie. So anyway, yes, I love Clarice Starling. I think what happened to her at the end of Hannibal. It's not pretty. I wish it had gone a different way. I do think the ultimate idea of Hannibal Lecter and Clarice being together in some strange way isn't so far off. I just think the degree that it goes to in that book, it's like every time I reread those last couple pages, I'm like, what? Like it's like yeah. And so and I've been describing what happens in the book to people who haven't read, and they're like, wait, what happens at the end of that book? I'm like, sit down. Like it's wild. Yeah.
Well, in what you found out about Thomas Harris, did you get the feeling at all that he was doing that sort of antagonistically, maybe as a pushback to all the pop culture, fandom of Silence of the Lambs?
I mean, that is certainly a theory that many fans have, that he was frustrated by how, the Silence of the Lambs film and how the character may have been taken away from him. But, when you read, he's written very little about how he writes, and his approach to writing as he writes it is that he is not creating these characters or these situations. He's kind of walking into them and observing them and writing down what happens. And he wrote at one point about Hannibal that he was very fearful of what Clarice was going to go through in that book. So again, it's hard to know entirely what was in his heart. I do think when you read Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal back to back, which I did for this, and I've read them many times, I do think he is generally trying to build this connection between the two. I don't know if I needed to know about their overactive sex life at the end of Hannibal, and I'm not sure it really would have gone that way. But I respect Tom Harris for not talking to me about this stuff. I mean, how many kind of really culturally important authors or musicians or filmmakers in the last 50 years do we have who just are letting it remain a mystery? I mean, he's almost like, he's not quite like Kubrick, but he is definitely someone who leaves you he's like, I'm never answering these questions, so have at it, I think, which I kind of admire a sense of mystery in someone like him.
Yeah. So it was originally then, it was your idea or it was your editor's idea to dive into the Silence of the Lambs?
It was, I've been wanting to do it. It's funny. I actually found an email to my agent because I was like, I know we talked about this. And I guess I had pitched this idea to my agent like February 10th of 2020. And I was like, oh, that's why this never went anywhere. Then the world shut down. But I think we had both. I think my editor and my agent and I had all individually known that this movie in particular, there was a great story there. But I think it was only when we started talking more and more about Lecter. And to be honest, when we were talking about the book, Trump had only mentioned Lecter once, maybe once or twice. It really was like, if I'm remembering correctly, it was only after like the contract was signed and all of a sudden he kind of went on that wild run of mentioning it every couple of stops for a few months, which in one way is like, it's very good if you're like hoping your book is about a character who's still relevant. It's a little strange if you're wondering why he's talking about a fictitious serial killer who he calls a wonderful man. I think it was just kind of a mind meld, but it was definitely my editor, Simon Schuster, who was like, let's make this about his whole pop cultural trajectory. And that got me excited because even though even though like a movie like Hannibal isn't as widely regarded as Silence of the Lambs, I knew that movie culture was really interesting. And I also was very excited about Manhunter, which I think is a great movie that people now, young people love that movie. To them, Silence of the Lambs and Manhunter are one and the same. And I'd never gotten all the way through the NBC series because I was too squeamish, so I was excited to finish all those and write about that as well. So it was, to me, the idea of being able to write a book that was about Hollywood and the publishing industry and TV and all those things, it's very rare that you have any kind of figure, real life or otherwise, who has a footprint in all those worlds. So that was really part of the fun for me.
Yeah, and it came, even if we weren't going to be doing this podcast this week, Silence of the Lambs would have come into my mind again this week because of all the horror that was just nominated for Oscars. And it makes
you're right.
It makes us remember something we've talked about before. Back when Silence of the Lambs cleaned up at the Oscars, there were people that tried to poo-poo its horror and just say, "Oh, it's really a thriller. It's really a thriller." We're like, what?
Yeah, it's a movie who eats human flesh, helping the FBI track down a guy who wears human flesh. That's a horror movie.
But
it's a horror. Yeah, I mean, you could see. I mean, I think it's a horror thriller. I think it's whatever you want. It's a procedural. But either way, they're all parts of genres that don't win Best Picture. I mean, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just what's so funny too is when you look at, it came out in '91, it won in '92, so 35 years ago. Right about now, and it's like this is the same Academy that just gave Driving Miss Daisy. I mean, like when you look at the Best Picture winners in the '80s. I mean, occasionally something kind of cool pops through, but like it was it's like Out of Africa, which is like, God forbid, I love Sidney Pollack. I love the score of that movie, but it is a grade A snoozer of a movie. It's not a Best Picture movie. Yeah, I mean, Driving Miss Daisy is Driving Miss Daisy. And, it's like, so for this to win, a year after Goodfellas lost to Dances with Wolves, it's pretty significant. And again, it's, as all fans of the movies know, it won Best Picture, it won Best Director, it won Best Adapted Screenplay, and it won Actor and Actress. And that hasn't been replicated yet. It's a very tiny club that can say that. I don't know when that will again. I mean, it's kind of rare that will ever happen again, unless I'm forgetting something.
It's so perfect that Spielberg wrote that note about this is the one that should have won because it's so freaking good. You watch it now, you just break down every scene. It's so good. It's so perfectly acted. Those couple of fake outs have been replicated by so many movies.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And those are two of the greatest fake outs ever. Like there's they still get me in a way. Yeah, and I interviewed Ted Talley, who adapted that script. And when right before I went and interviewed him, I reread the novel for the umpteenth time and reread and watched the movie again. And there's a lot of stuff he cuts out. I mean, there's a lot of kind of crucial stuff in there that you would think, oh, this has to be in here. Like Jack Crawford his wife is dying. It's a whole other drama. And man, that movie, his adaptation it's taught today as like a perfect literary adaptation.
Yep.
I know other screenwriters I know authors who have used that as a template for their own screenplay, and it's really a testament to like how much he just nails every part of that movie. He chews it down to the bone of what's actually important. Because I don't think there is a scene you can lose in that movie. There's no fat in that movie whatsoever.
It's perfect. It's a perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I was thinking when you were talking about how in the book anyway, that the relationship between Hannibal Lecter and Clarice has to culminate in something sexual, but then you make a great point about the TV series and a lot of people really wanted that relationship culminate in something sexual, and that Mads Mikkelsen was just like, well, the way it ends it is more spiritual than sexual, although they had undoubted sexual tension through the entire series. Although I think it's entirely possible that everybody has sexual tension with Mads Mikkelsen. It's possible.
I know, yeah. I mean, it's funny because when I watched that as like a full disclaimer, as like a cis het guy, I was like, it's pretty hot between these two dudes. Like, this is kind of like preheated rivalry. It's like, it's like I know that their official line is like, that it's up to the in the eye of the viewer, and they didn't want to overplay it as actors. But I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I've got a lot of close friends or coworkers. I don't know if I would like hug them and jump over a cliff. You know what I mean? It's like maybe I would. I don't know. It's a remarkable. I mean, the way that relationship plays out on the show is really remarkable. I mean, I have to say, like, that show is a little too gruesome for me. I mean, I don't want to on a horror podcast. I don't want to seem like a wimp, but like that show at times, I was like, I can't watch this particular scene, or I gotta. But man, it's such a good adaptation. I mean, it's really what Brian Fuller does. It's very rare that someone could do that. Which is, again, I watched the show in full, having just reread all these books, and so I knew them very well at that moment. And boy, he really honors Tom Harris's writing so well. and at the same time, it's completely a Brian Fuller kind of show. There's very few mind melds of like, and they never spoke. I mean, they never were in the same room. It's not like Game of Thrones where George R. R. Martin is like, involved in this in the writing. So for him to be able to pluck out all these elements, and yeah, like those two leads are. I mean, it's a real. I mean, I think everyone on that show wants to sleep with everyone, though. There's something very. It's like, and then Lawrence Fishburne's character is like, I'm going to solve crimes and eat, but whatever you guys got to do, it's fine. But like everyone else in that show is like, because there's like a hallucinatory five-way at some point. I was like, how is this on NBC? But it's, yeah. I mean, I think to take it to that level, because I think, Lecter in the books, in all those books, what's so great about this character and why he's been played by all these different actors in different ways is like, when you just read what he's saying, that's really all you have in the books. It's just his dialogue and his actions. You don't really get in the interior of his head until maybe the Hannibal book. You can interpret. He's very malleable. Like sometimes it's like, is this line of dialogue funny? I mean, that's why the Brian Cox versus Anthony Hopkins. It's like, I think they're very different variations. They're very different versions of Hannibal Lecter, but they both do honor their respective source material. I like both of them. I find Brian Cox's Hannibal Lecter very kind of bitchy and funny in a way. I do like that performance quite a bit. But Hopkins, that's a signature Hopkins performance, and like all-time horror or drama performance, I think, is that character. So,
oh, for sure.
You make a great point though when you're comparing them in the book that Brian Cox, his Hannibal Lecter, has not been incarcerated for very long, and he's still pretty pissed about it. Whereas when we in The Silence of the Lambs, he doesn't think he's ever leaving his basement. It's just him and himself now, and he's kind of made peace with that. And then, so when you skip to Hannibal, and then when I think everybody compares everything to The Silence of the Lambs, but I think you made a great point that the actors were actually taking the character where he was in his life at that time and the way he was reacting to the situation, which I'd never even thought about before, but it made perfect sense.
Yeah, and then you see, when they remade Red Dragon, when they did, the 2000s version, Hopkins is trying to go back to that very kind of feral, I hate Will Graham, I want to get the heck out of here, like, and it works in some scenes, it doesn't always work because you've already have that kind of more, not blasé, but you have that Silence of the Lambs kind of refined Lecter in your mind, but. Yeah, I mean, one thing that's great about these books, and I think it probably drove fans crazy at the time, I know it did actually, is that, there's long gaps. I mean, Red Dragon is 81, Silence of the Lambs is 88, and Hannibal is 99. And that's a long time for people to wait for a new Hannibal Lecter book. But I do think, to your point, like, those 7 or 8 years that passed between Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs, like, it's almost like, it's almost like poignant, like how much, like Lecter at that point is like, he's not defanged, but he's definitely kind of resigned and never leaving that place. And I think that comes across in Hopkins' performance. Like, he's just so at ease in his cell. The way his first shot is him just kind of standing there calmly, whereas like, Brian Cox is kind of a little squirmier, like doesn't love being there. Kind of, it almost feels like he's kind of a specimen there that wants to get out. So yeah, I keep getting asked if I have a favorite performance, and I really genuinely don't. I do think this is a character that could be interpreted and read any kind of way, which is why I know there will definitely be another Hannibal Lecter movie or TV show at some point in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
So in the process of having the idea for this, starting it, and then where you ended up, what surprised you? What took you on a left turn you didn't expect to go? You just kind of followed a different trail than what you expected.
Well, I mean, it was a trail that I expected a little bit, but that I was dreading and wound up being very unpleasant, which is that, one of the sort of subplots of the book is looking at the rise of serial killer culture in America. And I remember in the 90s, I mean, I still remember the day I was in college getting the latest issue of Spin magazine with Charles Manson on the cover and being like, wait a minute, like wasn't like Collective Soul on the cover last month? Like, well, how do we go from this to that? And I remember seeing Natural Born Killers and Seven and all these movies. So I know serial killer culture and true crime has always been a very vibrant genre, but there was this period in the 70s, right before Red Dragon came out, where there was just an explosion of serial killers getting very big media attention, like Son of Sam or Ted Bundy, and so I sort of figured I always kind of knew that, but then I would spend hours in these newspaper archives, and it's like, there's so many murderers we don't know about. There's so many terrifyingly sad unsolved crimes. And there's definitely mornings where I was like, I'd get up at like 5 to start working, and I'd be like, don't really want to begin my day with like Ed Gein's Jailhouse Confessions today. It's like it's not the most pleasant way to. So I tried to be very judicious with that in the book and be like, because I knew some people who read this are going to be huge true crime fans and love all that stuff, and it's totally fine. There's stuff in there for them. But I also didn't want to like gross people out by going. But it's shocking to me. I mean, like as someone who's been alive and lived in this country for many decades, it's like there's so many unsolved crimes, so many like unknown murders and mass murders, and so that was a little. At a certain point, I was like, "This is too much." It's like someone's got to do something about this. Like someone's got to get Hannibal Lecter to capture all these guys, these real life guys.
I remember being bothered by just reading about the research Scott Glenn did to play his part.
Oh yeah. Oh
That's
my gosh.
Very, very, very unnerving.
Yeah, he had to listen to audio tapes of young people being tortured, which is awful. And the one thing I really had forgotten was I knew that Jeffrey. I followed the Jeffrey Dahmer stuff to a degree, and when it happened in the '90s, I remember being very grossed out by it. But I had really totally forgotten how close the movies, The Silence of the Lambs, and Jeffrey Dahmer's arrest had been. I mean, it's less than 6 months, and it was really kind of like I can't even imagine something comparable now, where a big pop cultural thing happens, and all of a sudden it's very much becomes like a real life sort of thing. It's almost as if they discovered a bunch of vampires in the South the same summer, after Sinners came out or something like that. It's very, very unnerving, some of that stuff. And again, I tried to make it not gross, but like you can't ignore the fact that like People magazine put Jeffrey Dahmer on the cover and said it's a real life Silence of the Lambs, and those two events for a long time in the media were really tied together.
Yeah, it is. It is. You point that out. It's really alarming how prescient immediately prescient that novel or that movie was. That it was not just another serial killer, but a man eater. Which I don't think we had before. I mean, Ed Gein to a degree, but somebody who just actually. Well, that's what he was known for, was eating people.
It was right there in his name, Hannibal the Cannibal. Yeah, and I mean. It's, one thing I thought about a lot is when you look at how the portrayal of serial killers kind of changed after The Silence of the Lambs, because Hannibal Lecter is so refined and so relatively restrained, not truly restrained, but in many ways. And you started to see like that, like at a certain point in the 90s, like every serial killer was kind of like a mad genius. Whereas if you look at some like really schlocky 70s or 80s, they're just like, total lunatics. And in real life, like a lot of them are basically just scumbags. Like there's no real life Hannibal. There's not really a truly brilliant. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer was not smart. I mean, he had some intellectual capacity, but he was not sitting there listening to classical music and sketching illustrations of Florence from memory and talking about his favorite perfumes and stuff. That was not the reality. So I do think it kind of skewed our perception of serial. I think Silence of the Lambs did kind of skew our perception of serial killers for a little while in the 90s.
One of the things I loved about the movie is because I also love I loved that we had two serial killers in the movie, and one was very refined, and the other was a brute, was sloppy, was big, was terrifying, and I loved that. And it's funny because I don't think you haven't seen that very much reflected in the rest of the kind of serial killer films that we saw in the United States, but in Korea they ran with it. Like Old Boy. Same thing. And I Saw the Devil has the same thing. You've got these two actors. Both of them are, the antagonists of the film. And one is always very refined. And the other one is just wild and murdering everybody. And I thought it was fascinating to me. I thought it was done perfectly in The Silence of the Lambs. But I find it interesting that in the United States, it was just Hannibal that took off. Whereas around the world, it was that dichotomy of the two different types of killers.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that's so interesting about, again, this idea of why Hannibal Lecter has kind of become this anti-hero, it's because, well, the other guy is always much worse. I mean, as bad as, like, you look at the Tooth Fairy in Red Dragon Manhunter, you look at Mason Verger, who's the villain in Hannibal, who's the most over-the-top, and I'm a Mason Verger defender, not in his behavior, but, like, I like how over-the-top he is. I mean, I like the fact that it just makes Hannibal, by comparison, look kind of sane. It's just sort of like, oh, well, yeah, he eats people, but, like, he's not the Tooth Fairy. Like, Tooth Fairy is really messed up. Like, Mason Verger is, like, drinking martinis made of like, poor children's tears. He's, like, the most insane monster of all time. So I do think, it was kind of clever of Thomas Harris to set up Lecter as, the best possibility. If it's kind of a joke, but I mentioned the book. It's like, if you had to be a serial killer, wouldn't you rather be the smartest, classiest, quippiest one? It's like, you'd much rather be Hannibal Lecter than the freaking Tooth Fairy. It was just like a kind of a true outcast weirdo. Hey, that guy's a creep. Hannibal Lecter's got some refinement to him,
Actually, I think every single day Mason Verger seems more realistic to me. Every single day, I think.
You mean the gazillionaire the gazillionaire who hangs out with international war criminals and uses his vast fortunes to manipulate and destroy others? Yeah, it seems kind of relatable. You're right. Yeah.
And it's the other thing I was going to say about Silence of the Lambs, as much as we've talked about it, we have to mention Ted Levine's performance, because
he was so great.
That character. Ted Levine was so good, and that character is so indelible as well.
Yeah.
The way every character fits together. You think about movies over the years that not only have become pop culture staples, but so quotable.
Yeah.
So quotable.
Yeah.
There's so many things that Buffalo Bill says that have made it into the lexicon of the pop culture.
I literally had a Buffalo Bill shirt on today.
She did.
Oh my gosh! All right. Well,
I've got one. He's leaning against the door, and it says, "Hey, girl."
There you go.
There might be a watch list for that under the Patriot Act. You have to be careful with how much it's got to be. Well, it's funny because now the house that they use as the exterior, I think, of that movie has it's like an Airbnb sort of thing, where it's like you can rent Buffalo Bill's house, and it's like decked up, and I'm like, that's a cool idea. It's like, I would check into that, and then by 10:30 I'd be like, I'm just gonna go to a hotel. Like, this is cool. Like, I'll pay the rest of the deposit, but I don't need to wake up in the middle of the night in Buffalo Bill's house, even if it's just a simulation of. Yeah, it's a great character, a controversial character, but I think really one of the most fascinating and kind of like truly tragic kind of bag. I mean, awful villain, but there is something kind of sad about, especially when you get in the book and this character's background and how they've kind of been doomed since birth. And again, Buffalo Bill, he deserved what he got, but I do think that Harris does manage in these books, with the exception of Mason Verger, he does really try to elicit the most empathy you can for these monstrous people, which doesn't mean they're not monsters, but Harris really does try to make you understand how someone could become this way. Like, I mean, the Red Dragon has way more about the Tooth Fairy's backstory than Hannibal Lecter's backstory by far, and it's very interesting and satisfying kind of read.
And we should show the book again.
Oh, thanks.
And it comes out in February, correct?
Yeah, February 10th, right? It's right before Valentine's Day, which is actually when Silence of the Lambs opened. So for some weird reason, this has become the go-to, and opened and became, I know, people who are much younger who might be listening or watching might not realize, because they see old movies and they've just been around forever, but like, this was a phenomenon. I mean, this opened at number 1. It played for months and months and months.
We went.
It was
for Valentine's Day. We went.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You'd been dating about a year, I think. We'd only been dating.
Really?
That was a perfect date. Yeah, because our first movie date ever was Misery.
Oh wow, okay.
And then a year later, for Valentine's Day, Silence of the Lambs.
Where did you see it? What do you remember about the screening?
We saw it. It's the one that's closed now. That is over where that Raising Cane's is over.
University City.
University City.
It's no longer there here in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
And I remember it was the tuck scene. I was like,
yeah.
I was like, I don't understand what happened. I thought I missed something. What was going on? And he was like, oh, well, let me tell you for a second. I remember that, being embarrassed that I hadn't caught, like, what? Oh, I get it. Okay. Yeah, I remember that. I remember being just giddy. And I remember, I think the scene that made the biggest impression on me was when he pulls back and you see what has happened to the police officer who is like gutted and hanging there on that cage like an angel. And I remember thinking to myself that Jonathan Demme was a genius, that the way he treated the subject matter, which was incredibly gory and horrible, with such like muted colors, quiet, beautiful music, that he stole, like he leached all of the nastiness from it and gave it this weird beauty. I just think it was a perfectly made movie.
Yeah, and
that scene is great. Yeah,
I just remember the feeling in the ambulance when he pulls his face off.
Oh yeah,
you're like, the whole place was like, I mean, that's akin to the head rolling out of the boat in Jaws.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's one of those moments where you're up out of your seat, like, oh my God.
Our summer band for a short time called Jim Pembrey's Removable Face.
I like it.
That's how we.
Yeah, I remember being so shocked by that. And the funny thing too, you mentioned the scene where the officer's hanging. I remember the first 2 times I saw the movie, I was kind of like, I don't even understand what's happening. Like, is it his guts that are? I mean, just because it's kind of shadowy and it's so beautiful. I mean, it looks like it's like from The Hunger or like an MTV video. It's just, and it's not meant to be alluringly beautiful. It's not overly stylized, but it is kind of like, you're kind of like, wait, what happened exactly? Because you don't, they just cut away when he starts cutting away, they cut away. So you really don't entirely see it. And there's some, and there is some like, I think there's one of, and Harris's writing is also kind of similar in that he doesn't go too gory. Maybe in Hannibal, but like, I think in Silence of the Lambs, one of the descriptions is like a character's face is, or maybe this may have been one of the books says his face was a bloody dish, and I'm like, oh God, that tells me everything I need to know and don't want to know. But yeah, there's a lot of restraint in the first 2 Lecter films. It gets a little, by the time Ridley Scott comes in and does Hannibal, you've got like the splat of guts hitting the floor. You've got a lot of like, he's living it up. He's trying to make it kind of like a Giallo movie or something. But I do prefer the more restrained, like, what is that? I didn't know a human body could do that, and I don't think it should. Kind of feeling of Silence of the Lambs.
Oh yeah, incredible. Well, man, we don't want to take up too much of your time. We thank you so much again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. This is awesome. This is a great time.
We enjoyed it so much.
Loved it.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so jealous that you got to see it on opening weekend and you weren't a complete fraidy cat like me. And I'll keep blaming my mom and saying she wouldn't let me see it, but I think we all know that I was too scared to see it. I got to let her off the hook. It's not fair to her, but that's awesome. I've loved talking to people who saw this in the theater because, same with you two, everyone remembers it. I mean, it's just sort of like and there are certain movies when you go on opening night, opening weekend that are with you for decades. And it sounds like this is definitely that movie for millions of people.
Yeah, because I had not read the book, but my aunt had, and I remember seeing it on her when we get down to visit, seeing it on her stand or whatever, and hearing from her about how creepy it was. So even though I had not read the book, I was aware of it. And looking forward to seeing it. So yeah, that was one you don't forget. Yeah. So all right, the book comes out next month. Where can people find you on socials? Connect with you? Where are you at?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter a whole lot anymore. I do read it a lot, but it's. I don't even know what I don't even know what X or Twitter will be when this eventually airs. It seems to change every single day. And I'm at brianraftery.com. I'm very easy to find online. So, but thank you again. This has been wonderful. I'm so happy to talk about this, and I'm really grateful for your enthusiasm.
We were so excited. Thank you so much, and best of luck with the book as the legend of Hannibal Lecter continues.
That's
I don't think it's going to die out anytime soon.
Oh no, we're months, if not weeks, away from some announcement or something. I say that with no inside knowledge, but at this point, it's a character you can interpret a lot of ways, and I think it actually seems renewable. So we'll see. I'm sure it's becoming the big screen again, or some screen.
Awesome. Well, this has been a blast. This has been a blast. So best of luck, and
thank you.
We'll be back next month. We're going to be at Gateway Film Center to do another edition of Fright Club Live, and we're going to show. What are we showing?
May. We're going to show May, one of my absolute favorites, and we're going to talk about broken hearts in horror movies.
Yeah, so that'll be next time. But thank you again so much, Brian Raftery. The book is Hannibal Lecter, A Life. Check it out. It's wonderful. And thank you, Brian, for guesting. We enjoyed it. Until next time, she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And this is the Fright Club podcast. Stay frightful, my friends.